It is a big election year, and here in Michigan to comment about it are political columnist Eugene and former White House spokesperson Ari Fleischer. Both came to speak at the Michigan State University Political Leadership Program.
It is the largest bipartisan political dinner in the state. Republicans and Democrats gathered to hear what two nationally known speakers have to say about the current political climate. Eugene Robinson is a Pulitzer Prize winning political columnist for the Washington Post.
Ari Fleischer is a former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush. YNN Logan Network reporter with our producer Vanessa Denhargamo sat down with both men.
Okay, so gentlemen, tell me, how has politics changed since you both were involved in it and covering it?
How has politics changed? Well, there's some ways in which it hasn't changed at all, really. I mean, you know, it was always it's always a contest. It's always hard fought, and there are always big ideas involved. I think, and a lot at stake. You know, there's more money now in politics. Media. There are different kinds of media, and I think we maybe give more weight to media coverage in some ways than in the past or in the distant past. The two parties are more uniformly ideological. You know, there aren't liberal Republicans, there aren't conservative Democrats. There's more of an ideological clash. But in some ways, it's just still politics.
I think the essence of governing has not changed because we are still the fundamental democratic system our founders designed, which is a House and a Senate and an executive branch, a balance of power, and people have to fight, people have to agree, people have to make their case and see if they can't put together majorities. I think what has changed, and it's a reflection of how the media coverage of politicians and how politicians behave with changed coverage has changed, is that there's less ability and time for people to be thoughtful and reflective. Everything has sped up. There was once an era where all you had to do was watch the 6:30 news and get your morning paper. And those two events told you pretty much everything that was going on. And then cable TV came along. And all of a sudden the news was breaking every hour, on the hour. And now, with Twitter, with Facebook, with email, with social media, with everything else that's out there, everything is so instant. Previously, if somebody said something about an opponent, you could consider it. You could have a few hours to think about what you're going to say. A reporter could call lots of people and try to get a good lay of the land. Now, if you don't react within 10 minutes, you're late. Where were you? How come you didn't say something? And that changes politicians' behavior to make them faster, sharper, quicker on the draw, and less thoughtful.
So are you not envying the press secretaries today of the world?
I went through my Rolodex, which of course now is in my BlackBerry on my belt, and I found that a lot of the reporters I worked with at the White House back in 2001 to 2003, I did not have email addresses for them because I spoke to them on the phone. They called me. I called them back. They could hear my tenor and my tone if I was ducking and dodging and hiding. Now it's all electronic. It's so different now.
That's something at the Washington Post we have to train young reporters to do, is pick up the phone. We have to say, no, did you call them? Well, I emailed. No, call them up. You believe me, it's worthwhile. You'll learn more if you call them up.
When you hear the pause on the other end of the line, you know you've got somebody on the ropes.
Exactly.
And then a good reporter can probe and poke and get more.
But you don't get that in
email. Gives people like me a way out.
You know, there's one other just difference I'll mention quickly from the past, at least in Washington. Everybody, all the Congress people go home to their districts every weekend, you know, because you can get on a plane, you can go home, and they're expected to do so. Whereas in the past, you know, they used to spend more time in Washington. They used to get to know each other better, frankly, but now it's all, you know, they kind of Tuesday through Thursday is essentially most of the work week, and then Friday evening they're rushing home to the district, and they take half a day Monday to get back, and so there's, you know, they don't get along with each other because they don't know each other.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
With the advancement of social media, and in your opinion, how do you think that influences the decisions made in politics today?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said. It's sped everything up, and it's made people quicker on the draw and less reflective and thoughtful. On the other hand, my grandfather, who I was remarkably close to, a wonderful, wonderful man, he was born in the 1890s, and he died at the age of 91. He used to tell me when he was in his 70s that you can never stop change, you always have to embrace it. And I believe that. So I don't complain about it. I just make the most of it and try to stay optimistic through it all and turn it around and try to do something good with it. You know, on the other hand, thanks to social media, people can be in contact with people they otherwise never could have. You can send somebody a tweet and actually have them read it and respond to you. So on one level, we have more citizen participation. On the other level, it brings some rancor. It brings a lot of noise. No matter how much technology changes, though, the job of policymakers is to go back to fundamentals and basics, be thoughtful, try to be as reflective as you can with the pressures you have, and make good long-term decisions. That can never change, should never change. It's under stress, though.
Who's doing it right today in terms of handling the media reporting, whether it be a reporter or someone from the press secretary side, the other side? Who's doing it well today that you guys follow on Twitter or see on Facebook or read blogs? I mean, who's handling social media good today in the right way? Is that a big question?
Well, I'll give you my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that, especially until recently, the two most respected parts of the United States government were the Supreme Court and the Federal Reserve. And if you think about what those two institutions do, they have a closed process. They do not deliberate in public. And partially because they're out of the public eye, people don't jump in and say, how could you say that? How could you think that? And the Supreme Court, when they hand down a ruling that came out of a secret process, has tremendous respect for that ruling. They publish their record of what their results were. It's a paradox of our democracy that the institutions that are the most open, the most transparent and visible, the Congress and the White House, are the most pilloried. Yeah. And the ones that deliberate in private are held in the highest respect. I don't know what that means, because in democracy we have to have openness and transparency, but not for everything. And that it's
looking
paradoxical.
At it from a slightly that's fascinating. Actually, I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. From a slightly different angle, I think from a reporter's angle, I think for most of the last 3 years, say, the Republican Party was quicker and more nimble in playing in this sort of new, hyped up, super fast media environment and kind of getting a storyline out there on whatever the news of the day is. In fact, kind of defining the news of the day, defining the language with which we talk about the news of the day. I think it took a while for the White House and the Democrats in general to kind of catch up, but I think they got kind of outmaneuvered in a lot of the political battles of the first couple of years of the Obama administration. I think the Democrats have learned from that. I think they've gotten better at it. But
what do you think of the presidential race today?
Wide open. The Republican race has just been a constantly changing game of musical chairs to see who gets, when the music stops, to sit next to Mitt Romney. And I've never seen this in my lifetime. We almost always know who's next in the Republican Party. They go through a bump in the road, but they win. Yeah. And this cycle is unlike anything before. Looking ahead to the general, I think we're in for a 50-50 election. I think Barack Obama remains highly politically vulnerable, in large part because the economy is doing so poorly and the deficits and the debt are so high. And it's interesting because even Rick Santorum is 1 point down, according to a Gallup poll that came out today, against Barack Obama. Mitt Romney's up by 4 points. So I think you're going to see a pretty close general election campaign. The only thing that would really change it is if the economy really starts to dramatically pick up speed and unemployment drop even more than it has. If unemployment continues to bump along the way it is, or even if it ticks back up, which still is a possibility, that's going to keep Barack Obama in the soup.
I basically agree. I think this is a divided country, and I think you start with the premise that it's going to be a close election. This is a challenging environment for an incumbent to run in, but then again, incumbents have advantages. So I saw that poll today, the Gallup poll today. It's kind of an outlier compared to polls that we've seen until now. So we'll wait and we'll see the next one, and we'll see if this is confirmed, if it's real, or if we go back to what the polls were saying until now, which was that Obama seemed to be polling ahead of either Romney or Santorum. But either way, I know that at the White House and at the RNC, Republican National Committee, they're planning for a close election because that's the way the country is now. It's very difficult to imagine a landslide either way.
Mr. Fleischer, could you please elaborate on your opinion on Barack Obama's vulnerability due to America's economy?
Well, it's the history of the country. The economy is almost always the largest driver in voter behavior. The real exception to that was 2004 when, because of 9/11, terrorism and national defense played a much more prominent role. But the economy drives most. And the economy now, we've had 3 consecutive years of unemployment being above 8%. We have long-term unemployment. People haven't lost their jobs for more than 6 months, the highest on record ever. Value of homes has declined more today than it did during the Great Depression. And poverty is up. 6 million people have fallen into poverty since 2009. These are the economic factors that are just making the country say, are things better? I voted for change and I don't like what I'm getting. It's an arguable point how much of that is attributable to Barack Obama's policies. I'll take one side, others will take another. But when a voter goes into the polls, it's very often a reflection of how do I feel about the state of the economy today, and will it get better, and how will I vote if the economy is so bad?
But there is another factor, and we could and probably will disagree on what caused things to get to reach the state. I think when the voter goes in to the polls, he or she also has to decide who's going to get us out of this mess. And have I heard a credible alternative? I think everyone agrees that things are better now than they were in the depths of the crisis. They're not good, however, but they're better than they were in the depths of the crisis. So it's somebody articulating an alternative vision that sounds better to me, that sounds more promising to me than what I think I'm going to get from 4 more years of President Obama. I think people will ask themselves that question, and we'll see what the answer is.
You know, this is a youth neighborhood news program. What should the younger generation be paying attention to today in terms of politics? What should they be looking at?
JOBS. I mean, if I was young and I was saying I'm going to graduate from school, what's next for me? And this is where the role of policymakers is on the side. Can they create an environment for the private sector to prosper and grow? Or are they hindering private sector growth? Are they threatening private sector with more taxes and regulations that makes it harder for them to hire young people? That's what I'd be on the lookout for. The other thing I just want to point out, because I think somehow there's got to be an effective and soft way to bring this a part of political discussion, and especially for young people, is there was a front page story in the New York Times that the majority of children today born to moms under 30 are born into single family homes. And I don't think there was anything harder for anybody to make it in America than to not have a dad at home. It makes it harder for that child to get a good education, for that mom to spend time helping the child with the education. It makes it hard for the mom to work and raise children. And it's a factor that politicians have to deal with great sensitivity because it's such a complicated issue. But your question about what about young people? Well, every generation we have new young people. And so long as we continue to have a breakdown of family, we're making it so hard on everybody.
Mr. Fleischer, how was it like being George W. Bush's spokesperson?
I can't answer that one.
Piece of cake, softball questions, easygoing reporters, uncontroversial era. It was wonderful. I believed in what I did. I believed in my boss. I continue to do so, despite how controversial some of the big decisions he made were. How the decision to go to war in Iraq, particularly, turned out to be, for a reason that we all thought was true, that turned out to be wrong, that Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction. But it was an era of terror, and because of 9/11. And that, more than anything, is what marked that period of time. But to be the press secretary to any president is a thrill of your life. Especially, the only way to do it is to believe, and I love taking that podium and articulating on behalf of somebody I believed in. I love taking the tough questions from reporters. I love that part of our democracy, where they're defending their positions in our First Amendment system, and I'm defending what my boss is doing. And we go at it. And that's the way it should be, and I'm glad I'm not doing it anymore.
Mr. Robinson, you won a Pulitzer for your work. What was the piece on?
I won the Pulitzer for 10 columns that I did during 2008 on the presidential campaign. And most of them were related to the Obama campaign and to his trajectory. If you read all 10 of the columns, the first was from the Iowa caucuses, and the last was a column I wrote the morning after election night, and it was about the experience of that night. It was a personal column. I grew up in the South at the tail end of Jim Crow segregation, and so for me, on election night, to be able to call my dad, who was 87, or no, my dad was 92, and he died shortly thereafter too, and my mom was 87, but I could call them and tell them that they had lived to see the election of the first African-American president, was a moment that I would never forget.
I am Edward McNeil III with YNN Logan Networks, where we bring you the younger side of the news.